Xicanisma started off as an Instagram page. My goal initially was to get maybe 200 followers and just have a small community. A couple years later, now it's turned into a platform, a really big platform that I never imagined possible. My name is Cassandra Alicia. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I run a platform called Xicanisma. I'm also one half of a podcast called Bitter Brown Femmes, and I'm here in RGV area going to do a lecture tomorrow at the university on machismo. Definitely when I started Xicanisma, I tried to separate myself from it as much as I could because I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted to just put information out there without people relating it to me. I'm also like a mother and I'm also a partner. I also go to school and I do a lot of other things that I don't necessarily put on Xicanisma, but at the same time, I also do want people to acknowledge that there is a human being behind Xicanisma, because a lot of times people forget that. I don't think that I have a certain agenda. I think that I pretty much just try to post a little bit about everything that has to do with the Chicanx, Latinx community, because we're not all the same and we all have different identities and different experiences. So I try to post a little bit of everything as conversation starters, or maybe just as an introduction to politics, an introduction to what it means to be Latina, what it means to be femme, what it means to be bi, et cetera, et cetera. With having a platform, you do have a responsibility, even if you don't want it, because whatever you are an influencer. So your words have a lot of weight and a lot of people do listen to you. At times when I fuck up or I say problematic things or even do problematic things, I need to be held accountable, and because I do have a big platform. I've actually been banned on Facebook like twice, but it's actually been mostly because of posts that attack men, you know, misandry or whatever. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of Latinos to be called out, especially on a public forum, especially in a forum that they think they're included in. For someone to have a name like Xicanisma and constantly call out machismo and rape culture and men in our community, it doesn't sit well with them, and it's not something that they're used to, but it's also why it's important to have these call-outs and have these conversations about machismo and how it damages not only the women in our community, but also the men. I'm from El Paso, so I've grown up there, and the border is definitely an experience, I would say. I don't think that it's the same experience for everyone that lives in a border city. For example, the RGV is not the same as El Paso, it's not the same as San Diego, etc. And I also think that within those communities, not everyone experiences the same. Like, my experience is definitely not the same as someone who is undocumented in El Paso. The border is not an abstract thing. And the way that usually we see in politics, or the way that people describe the border or think about the border, is in an abstract way that we know is very real, and we know what it's like to be living in a space that's militarized. And I think that when I was growing up, I didn't necessarily understand it fully. I just knew that it separated me from my family, and that even though we were connected and in the same space, it was still two very different places, separated by a wall. It's also giving me a connection to culture, and a connection maybe that other people might not have in other areas of the United States. So I think that border communities are very important, and especially right now, given the political climate, it's important to uplift border communities and not necessarily give that space to people that do not live at the border, who do not understand the border, who have never been to the border. My work, or like my platform, is about making people uncomfortable in a way of like calling out your privilege, calling out your biases and things that you don't want to talk about. You know, when we see when we're like male tears or white tears, you know, that's like where the tears come from. Like when people are just complaining or whining, or like maybe sometimes even literally crying because you're calling them out. So I'm about that. I think people should be uncomfortable, and I think people should get their feelings hurt if that's going to make them rethink their privilege, if that's going to make them rethink their stance on things. I'm very pro that. And that's just my approach. I've been problematic. I've said a lot of fucked up things, especially on my platform, and it took people like dragging me to fully like understand my bullshit. I don't think people need to hold people's hands through things. So I'm not gonna hold a man's hand and explain machismo to them. I'm not gonna hold a white person's hand and explain racism to them. I don't think that people's feelings should be centered. So if they're gonna cry about it, then yeah, that's what's gonna happen. During general elections, a lot of people come out, a lot of people are pumped up about it and they care about things, and then, you know, elections pass and it's like they go back to their lives and they forget about everything that they claim they stood for. A lot of liberals come out when something mainstream is happening, and they go to the protest and they take photo ops, and then they go home. And then the communities, the marginalized communities are actually affected by everything, are left to fend for themselves. It's not just about voting, that voting is not gonna liberate us. And with that being said, like, it's an ongoing thing. It's not just about election season. So, for example, right now that the holidays are here, I think it's a perfect time to have conversations with our families, especially in Latinx families, like talk about their anti-Central American sentiments, talk about xenophobia, about nationalism that we're seeing in Mexico right now with the caravan. Like, these are all important things that we should be talking about year round, not just with our families, but just in general. It's just an ongoing thing that needs to happen. And like I said, especially in Latinx communities where 39% of Latinos voted for Cruz, 34% of Latinas voted for Cruz. So there is a lot to unpack so that we don't see these fucking numbers in the next election, because it's super embarrassing and we just need to start collecting our own families and our own friends.